Hello, everybody. Thank you for having me today. My name is Kieran. I work for the local mental health charity Havering Mind. Some of you may have heard of us before. We're based in Havering. We're based in Hornchurch, actually in Havering, and we provide mental health support services to adults living not only in Havering but also now in Barking and Dagenham. We have a number of services that cover Barking and Dagenham, which is really good because we know that it is an area of need. I'm here to talk to you today for a little while about mental health awareness. I'm going to talk about some of the first of all, what is mental health, what is well-being. I'm going to talk about some of the most common issues. We're then going to look at it in more of a LGBT sort of perspective and some of the issues that people in that community may face. Then I'm going to sort of talk to you about some of the different support areas there are and resources and other organisations and things like that. So I'm going to try and share my screen with you now. Well, before I do that, actually, I'm going to share a video on YouTube. Hopefully that's going to work, Annie. So let's see. Where is it now? Share computer screen. Right. I'm going to mute my bit here.
Mind Matters in Minutes. What is mental health? Part 1. A definition. If a student came up to you and said, "What is mental health?" how would you answer them? Maybe you'd say, it's obviously being mentally healthy, isn't it? To which your student replies, "That's a tautology. It doesn't mean anything." And they'd be right. So maybe you'd say mental health is to do with things like schizophrenia, depression, anxiety. But that's a list of disorders. It's not mental health. So maybe you say mental health is being happy. But then happiness is just a mood. Our lives are full of positive experiences that have nothing to do with happiness at all. So what is mental health? Here's one definition from the World Health Organization. Mental health is a state of well-being in which the individual realises his or her own abilities, can cope with the normal stresses of life, can work productively and fruitfully, and is able to make a contribution to his or her community. Now that's good, but it's long. We could boil it down to this. Mental health is our ability to respond to challenges. What kind of challenges? It could be anything, from a sudden encounter with a tiger to anticipating an exam. It could be something physical like an illness, something social like bullying or being left out. It could be an all-consuming crush on someone or a to-do list the size of a shark. It could be arguments with your family or a difficult essay, or the death of a parent, or a long-distance move. The fact is that life rarely goes according to plan. And whenever we are beset by the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune, mental health is our ability to bounce back and stay on course. Now, how do you get this ability? Are you born with it? No. Mental health can change, and the things that tend to shape it are called risk factors and protective factors. Protective factors, such as a sense of self-efficacy, a supportive family, or strong friendships, tend to cushion and support you, making it more likely that you'll maintain a state of positive mental health and stay on track. On the other hand, risk factors such as chronic illness or low socioeconomic status can have the opposite effect, exacerbating the impact of disruptions in your life and making it more likely you'll experience a decline in mental health. The good news is that protective factors can offset risk factors. And even better news is that protective factors introduced in early years can help shape positive mental health across a person's lifespan. So if a student asks you, what is mental health? You can say mental health is a state of mind that allows you to cope with the endlessly inventive challenges life throws at you, and that state of mind can be at any time eroded by risk factors or supported by protective factors. That's a great explanation, and your student will love and respect you for it. But it does raise another important question. If you wanted to improve the mental health of as many people as you possibly could, what do you think would be the best time and place to do that?
Hopefully you could all hear and see that properly. You did? Oh, brilliant. Yeah, that's actually obviously it's an animated video. They were showing that in Australian secondary schools. I think it's a really good one to use because it's nice and easy to understand and explain. But there's a whole series of them videos online that you can watch all about different mental health things. I think they're really useful. Okay, so in this session, as I said, if we'll just go talk about what is mental health and well-being, we'll look at some of the common and less common issues, the LGBT issues, and then what other support and help there is out there. So with any training session that I do, and I've done these similar ones to what we're doing now to lots of different organisations, to schools, to students, to parents, other charities and so on. And whenever we do them, I always begin and I ask a question. And it's this: what do you think mental health is? Now, normally if we were in a room together, I would pick on somebody and I would get them to stand up and say what they think it is. And normally 9 times out of 10, they'll stand up and they'll say, oh, it's feeling sad, or it's feeling down, or it's feeling low or depressed, or whatever it is, which is right. That is an element to it, but they always immediately go to the negative side of it. I think they see that word mental and they immediately assume that it's something bad or it's something negative, when actually mental health or well-being, I think probably is a better word, encompasses a whole range of different things, doesn't it? Our thoughts, our feelings, our emotions, everything that we do within our lives. But I think it is quite hard for people to explain or to define what it is. If I was to say to you now, what is physical health, you'd all say, oh, it's the physical health of my body. I can walk properly, or my lungs are working good, my heart's good, and things like that. But their mental health, people find it quite hard to describe. So in terms of in that video, so there's not one specific definition for it, but in that video they used the World Health Organization definition, which they said mental health is defined as a state of well-being. I think that is a really good word, in which every individual realizes his or her own potential, can cope with the normal stresses of life, can work productively and fruitfully, and is able to make a contribution to her or his community. So what does that mean then? So what makes up mental health? Well, as I said a minute ago, so many different things make it up, don't they? So you obviously have well-being, you have emotions, our thoughts, our feelings, whether we're having a good day, a bad day, a sad day, an excited day, our ability to function in day-to-day life, so to get up, to brush our teeth, to have breakfast, to take the kids to school or go to work in normal times, or work from home, our ability to manage life events, so the different things that happen to us in our lives, and God only knows, obviously, probably the most significant thing that's ever happened in any of our lives has probably been the past year, hasn't it, with COVID? How have we dealt with that? How have we managed, the different changes and the uncertainty that come with all of that? Then you have things such as self-esteem, our confidence, our self-worth, our body image, our sense of who we are as people, our identity, our purpose, empowerment, positivity. All these different words and phrases make up our mental health and what our well-being is. Very much like the cogs there that you can see in that diagram of a person's brain, and they all interact with one another. So what does it mean then to have good mental health, or to be mentally well, or have a healthy mental health? Well, a picture says 1,000 words, doesn't it? If you were to type that into Google, it would come up millions of images, such as the ones on the screen now. And you've got pictures there of women that look quite relaxed and content, the guy out there running, and man there going to work, the child there learning. What it means to have a good or positive mental well-being means different things to different people, doesn't it? Because we are all, we're all different people. But generally, it does mean that we have a certain set of abilities or a certain set of skills, and the main ones I think are on the screen now. So the ability to function well, so the ability, to, as I said a minute ago, to get up in the morning, to take care of ourselves, to eat breakfast, to get through our days, to do the general things that each of us as human beings do in life. Unfortunately, some people that have a poor mental health find it quite hard to function well. The ability to learn new things, to take in new bits of information, the ability to feel, express, and manager, as that says there, a range of positive and negative emotions. So to deal with all the different things that happen to us, whether they be good, whether they be bad, and, you know, to be able to understand, you know, all the emotions that come with them, to cope with and manage change and uncertainty, to form and maintain good relationships with other people. You know, all of us build relationships all throughout our lives, don't we? Our friends, our family members, our colleagues, our customers, even people that we know. You know, for some people that have a poor mental health, they can find it quite hard to build relationships and to make friends and, you know, romantic relationships, that sort of thing. Also worth mentioning there, the ability to end bad relationships as well. So, you know, some people, in particular young people, get into the wrong crowd, you know, should we say, where, you know, the bad relationships are causing issues for them. A moral sense of right and wrong, you know, to understand that, very important. Developing an identity or a self-worth, you know, and again, things like confidence and body image are involved in that. And the ability as well to look after our physical health. I think that is very important and often very underlooked, shall we say, when we talk about mental health. People don't tend to necessarily recognise the link between the two. They're very much intrinsically linked. If you've got a poor mental health, you know, you're likely to, your physical health is likely to suffer, and if you've got a poor physical health, you're likely to, you know, it's likely to affect your mental well-being. I like to use this metaphor quite a lot, in particular when I do it for young people. If you know, not to turn this into a science lesson, but if you think of the human brain as like a computer, and that is essentially what it is. You know, the brain is incredible. I don't want to say object, but incredible organ. You know, made up upon billions of cells called neurons, which is basically like billions of wires all dotted around inside of our heads right now, and they're sending messages to everything that we do. The fact that we can sit here and you can listen to me, and that you can, you know, look at this presentation, you can breathe, everything like that. Your brain is in control of everything you do. Now think of your computer at home, or, you know, laptop or things like that. What happens to it when it's got too much stuff running, or where you haven't updated it, or it's got too many windows open? Happened to us all, hasn't it? It slows down, it freezes, it crashes. In some cases, it completely breaks down. And if you think of the human brain as like that, if you've got so many different things going on, so many issues or worries, and if you haven't taken care of it, if you haven't put the right antivirus software in it, if that makes sense, then it's, you know, it's obviously going to have an effect on its ability to function. And then there's just another image there of the brain. I think if I didn't work for a mental health charity, I'd be a neuroscientist. This is what's called the Wellbeing Spectrum, and this is a tool that psychiatrists and people like that use when they're training. And, you know, if you imagine that, I always say, if you imagine there's a line from one side of the room to the other, and on one side you have healthy, on one side you have unwell. You know, these are the different stages that people go through in terms of their well-being. So obviously in an ideal world, we want everybody to be on the left-hand side there, the healthy or the feeling good section. But, you know, there is people that are in the unwell and really not okay, be it, you know, people that are struggling, perhaps dealing with different, you know, stresses or anxieties or things that are getting them depressed. And what's important to remember about this spectrum is that each of us, every single one of us, is somewhere along this spectrum at any one point in our lives. We don't stay at the same place. We move in between the different bits, you know, all throughout our lives, and depending on what happens to us. But, you know, all of us are somewhere along there. And, you know, with things like therapy and with things like, you know, education and awareness raising and stuff like that, the whole idea is to push as many people as we possibly can into the, you know, the healthy sort of spectrum of that line. So with good mental health, or with positive mental health, people do tend to do better in every way. So they enjoy their lives, which is what obviously we would want everybody to do. That are able to deal with the stress and difficult times, and, you know, different changes and anxieties and things. And, you know, again, to refer back to COVID, the amount of change and, you know, pressure that's been put under huge numbers of people, probably everybody, you know, has been massive in the past year. Generally able to function better, able to do better at school or work, able to form and develop meaningful relationships, and generally do have a good quality of life. And that doesn't mean to say that their lives are perfect or that, they've got perfect mental health. It just means that, they have a relatively good quality of life. And I think this point really, sums that up. Good mental well-being doesn't mean that you will never experience situations you find difficult. It does mean that you might have the resilience to cope when things get tough. That's really important to remember that one. And then just sort of around this section of the presentation off, this sort of line here is, so we all have mental health. I think you often, I often hear people say, well, I don't have mental health, and they're referring to mental health problems. But all of us, like our physical health, we all have our own mental health and well-being. And then life is like a roller coaster, isn't it? So each of us are on our own track, shall we say, in life, and that track, just like a roller coaster, goes up, goes down. There's moments when we're happy, there's moments when we're sad, there's moments when we're excited and elated and on top of the world, and there's moments where we're, a bit down and hurt and things like that. And everybody's track in life is different, isn't it? Some of us are perhaps more up and down than others, but, it is very much up and down, isn't it, in life? It's not going to be a straight line, because that would be quite a boring life, wouldn't it? So what are mental health problems then? Well, it is what it said. They're problems in a person's mental health or their well-being. So we'll start off with some facts for you. Now, these facts are all taken. I haven't plucked them out of thin air. They're all taken from NHS and government documents, and they're all, they're all based on the numbers of people that get diagnosed with mental health problems. So in some cases, I think that they can be a little bit perhaps out of date. And this one here, you think, this is probably the biggest one that you see on adverts and leaflets and things like that. So as many as 1 in 4 people will experience problems with their mental health during their lifetime. Now, I think it's probably higher than that, because I think the number of people that don't talk about it, or don't seek help or seek treatment, perhaps don't even realise that they have a problem. So I think, in reality, I think that is probably a lot higher, but that is still 1 in 4. That's a significant number of people, isn't it? Between 8 and 12% of the population experience depression in any one year, and depression probably is the big one, which I would call. And that is, again, that's millions of people, isn't it? Now, that doesn't mean that millions of people are, depressed enough to, not be able to get up and get out of bed or go to work or things like that. Again, depression is like that spectrum before. It can go from mild depression to moderate, to more severe, more extreme depression. We'll talk about that in a minute. Approximately 30% of all GP consultations are related to mental health problems. Now, and again, bearing in mind this is a statistic from a couple of years ago, so I have no idea what it would be like now. But, if you can imagine how difficult it is for a person to talk about their mental health in a very short GP session, it can be very, very difficult, and for the GPs as well. The GPs to have to recognise certain signs and symptoms and things, and that's why educating, not just the public, but educating the GPs and doctors, nurses, and things like that is also extremely, extremely important. And this one here, I think this one shocks quite a lot of people. 20% of children have a mental health problem in any given year. And I think people tend to think that, people with mental health problems are older or elderly type people, when actually lots and lots of children, and from my experience in Havering, lots and lots of children do go through lots of, different mental health problems. And if it isn't dealt with, or, if there isn't an intervention at an early age, it can escalate, and that can lead on into adulthood and, to all sorts of further problems. And then stress actually isn't the biggest reason for time off work in the UK at the minute. It's obviously COVID. But in normal times, stress is the biggest reason for time off work, costs massive amounts of money. After that, I believe it's backache and back pain. So the most common mental health problems, and now I call this the big 3. Certainly the ones that most people have heard of. Most people have probably experienced these in some degree or some form, but we'll go through each of them. So depression. Now, when people think of depression, they tend to think of people being low, people being sad, people being down. And that is it. That is a part of it. But Feelings of being down or feeling sad or a bit low, they're all normal human emotions, aren't they? They're all normal human thoughts. We all get like that from time to time. When it becomes a mental health problem is when it's either when it's a prolonged period of it, so day in and day out, and a doctor, I believe, would say for 2 weeks or more, but also when it's having an effect on some of the abilities that we mentioned earlier on. So in particular, our level of functioning. So if it's, causing us not to be able to, look after ourselves physically, or get up in the morning and do day-to-day chores, or, sort out our bills, or take care of ourselves, and, things like that, that is when it becomes, a problem for us. And it comes in very different forms. If you think of that spectrum again, from mild depression, where it's, it's there, but it's perhaps the person's not having too much of an effect on their ability to function, and then all the way at the other side, where it's more extreme or severe, where the person literally just is so down and so demoralised, demotivated that they just can't get up, they can't get out of bed, that sort of thing. Anxiety, again, feeling anxious, worried, or a bit anxious about things, is a normal human emotion. All of us have it from time to time. It can act as a good thing, it can act as a motivator, it can keep us on our toes. But again, when we talk about it as a mental health problem, is where it's a prolonged period, or where it's having an effect on our functioning. So anxiety is like an umbrella term. It covers a whole range of different issues. So things like generalised anxiety, phobias, body image issues, eating disorders, OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder, that sort of thing, and also panic attacks as well. So it's a very, very complex, mental health problem. People can get anxious for anything, over all sorts of different issues. They get something in their head and they over worry, and they get very, very anxious about it. And then stress, another one I'm sure that everybody has heard of and has probably experienced from time to time. Stress can be useful, can be a normal human emotion, but again, it's where we're talking about a prolonged period where it's having a big effect on the person's overall well-being. Now, these three, as I said, are certainly what I would call the big three. They're certainly not standalone issues or problems. In most cases, somebody that's going through depression will probably experience, symptoms of anxiety, and people that are stressed, it could lead to depression, and so on and so forth. And they're very much interlinked or comorbid, I think is the word, with other issues, as well. But these are certainly the big three. And these are some I like to use artwork in my presentations as well. These are some depictions of depression and anxiety as illustrated or as drawn by people that have had these things. So this one, I think in particular, is quite striking, very black, isn't it? Very dark. This one here, the eyes on this one always gets me. Very, very fear and anxiousness in them eyes. And art, you'll find that things like art and creative activities are used as channels for people that have got issues. This one as well, I can relate to this one with so much stuff going on in the person's head there. It just looks like it's all exploding out, doesn't it? And that one there. So some of the other mental health, we call them the less common mental health problems, but obviously still very, very serious. I won't spend much time on these at all. I'll just give you an overview. Some of the terms you've probably heard of: psychosis, schizophrenia, so things like where somebody's having a psychotic episode. These can involve, things like seeing things, delusions, hallucinations, hearing voices, paranoia, that sort of thing there. A lot of it is to do with the chemical makeup of the brain as well, so it involves getting medication and stuff like that right. Can be a very, very scary and disturbing thing, I would imagine, to experience. Eating disorders, things like anorexia and bulimia, very, very complex mental health problems, all to do with the way a person sees themselves and sees the size of their bodies, their weight, that sort of thing. Very much linked to body image, very much linked to, all sorts of things like restricting diets and, you know, over-exercising and stuff like that. And they, I think in the past they've been typically thought of as disorders that women or young girls, teenage girls get. Well, actually, we've seen a lot more men and boys as well experiencing, you know, eating disorders and body image problems. Self-harming, it's not actually classed as a problem in itself, it's classed as a behaviour. But self-harming is what it says, where somebody harms themselves, you know, for whatever reason, to you know, to deal with or to cope with whatever's going on in their head. Or it doesn't necessarily have to be physical self-harming, it can be psychological as well. Then obsessive compulsive disorder, we've probably all heard of that one as well. OCD, where somebody gets something in their head and it goes round and round and round in a session. It then leads them to do certain compulsive behaviours. So I think the typical one, probably the most well-known one here, would be the person that's got an obsession about germs or cleanliness, and, you know, they'll go off and they'll wash their hands, you know, thousands of times, you know, a day, to, you know, to basically as a coping mechanism to deal with that issue. Then you have things like bipolar. Bipolar, if you imagine that roller coaster track where people have periods of extreme highs, you know, they're up really high and they're on top of the world doing things that they wouldn't normally do, and then all of a sudden they, like in the roller coaster, they go down and they have periods of sort of manic or high depression. Then personality disorders, and that could be a whole host of different things, couldn't it there? So these are just some of them there, but, you know, there is literally hundreds of different mental health problems, and we don't have time obviously to go through all of them, and I wouldn't claim to know all about them either. So looking at just a bit more in terms of certain issues that face the LGBT plus community, and I know that obviously if we was in a room now with one another, we could probably do this a lot more interactively, and, you know, with all sorts of exercises and stuff like that. But I'll just go through, you know, some of the issues that, you know, from what I've gathered, I believe are, you know, specific. So obviously you have things like stigma and discrimination, perhaps not so much these days in 2020, but you know, I'm sure there still is lots of that out there that, you know, does make it very, very hard for people in this community. Isolation, loneliness, bullying, identity, sexuality, gender issues. There is issues called gender dysphoria as well, which are very complex, again, very you know, to do with where people people are in the wrong body, so to speak. You know, in their heads they believe they are a different gender, and that can cause all sorts of issues, and it's very much to do with young people as well, young children. You know, there's lots of ethical discussions as well about, you know, that, and about what age, you know, children can decide, you know, they are, you know, what gender they are, and things like that. There's lots of body image issues involved in it as well. Lots of comparing to other people. One of the big things that we find as well, in particular with young people, is this over dependency on social media. So you know, basically means being addicted to things like Facebook and Instagram and TikTok and all that type of stuff, and that can have a big you know, effect on a person's well-being, because they're constantly comparing to other people. They're constantly you know, trying to get the most likes and things like that, or they live in sort of a virtual world, or a virtual sort of identity. Then you have other issues like suicide, ideation, self-harming as well, big thing, and just the general sort of culture sort of in that community. There can be a lot of, you know, problems there that, you know, that cause people's well-being. I've actually, just on a side note, I started watching it last night. There's a really good program that's on Channel 4. It's called It's a Sin, and it's a drama / comedy, and I was watching it last night actually, and it's all about in the 80s, like a group of young men who were gay, and all the different issues, you know, that were going on there with AIDS and, you know, everything there. And I know that was a long time ago now, but you can just see what a massive you know, the amount of issues that were there then, and, you know, in comparison to now, and all, you know, all sorts of things there. So I think in the past it was a physical illness like AIDS that was a massive sort of issue. I think nowadays so much of it is body image and sort of the gender sort of aspect of it and the identity issues there. So what other things can cause us to become mentally distressed? Now this could be for anybody, of all different backgrounds and areas. So it could be life events, and that could mean all sorts of different things, couldn't it? It could be different things that happen to us, people moving out, having a new baby, getting a new job, getting fired, being furloughed, catching coronavirus. I don't know, all sorts of different things can be classed as life events, can't they? Financial problems for a lot of people, that can be a big cause of mental health distress. Issues about money. Unfortunately, as much as we would like to think that money doesn't sort of rule the world, really, money is a huge aspect of anyone's life, isn't it? It's sad to say. Family problems, issues with parents, brothers, sisters, siblings, other family members, relationship issues, friendship, breakup. That could be so many different areas, couldn't it? Physical health problems, if this person has got problems, with their body, or if they've got any disabilities and stuff like that. I always think, because I do some work with some blind people, and I always think if you was to go blind, the massive effect that would have on your well-being, not being able to see, and it just, I can only imagine what that would do to a person's well-being. Bereavement, and again, bereavement, it is a normal aspect of life. Everybody is eventually going to pass away, and people that around us that pass away, but everybody deals with that in different ways, don't they? And how some people perhaps with poor mental health, it might really have a massive sort of knock-on effect on their overall well-being. Bullying, abuse, body image concerns, we spoke about that one, things like eating disorders and body dysmorphia, comparing to other people, seeing images in the media or online of this so-called ideal way to look, things like that. Personality traits, so some people might be more prone, some people that say are more sensitive or more shy or obsessive, things like that. Inheritance and genetics, problems in the workplace or at school, isolation, loneliness, drugs, alcohol, poverty, unemployment. So these are just, this isn't an exhaustive list. There will be other ones as well, but these are sort of the generic things that might cause somebody to have a poor mental health. So what treatments and therapy approaches are there? So there certainly is help and support out there. I'm not going to necessarily sugarcoat it all, because I think we all know and we all appreciate the huge strain that the NHS in particular is under at the minute. That was under before all the COVID stuff. To be honest, was under huge strain in terms of mental health. So God only knows what what the pressures they're under now are. But in terms of a person, there is lots of different treatments. So first of all, at Mind, we always talk about this friends and family support. So having the people around us that we can trust, that we feel, confident to talk to, and having, that sort of network around us. That doesn't necessarily mean that we have to have loads of friends or have to have, a big family or have to tell everybody that we meet, our issues. It's good to have, that support base around us. Then there's various things, or countless things probably, that come under this sort of overall banner of talking therapies. So you would have things like cognitive behavioural therapy, which is the CBT, which is a therapy approach that most counsellors in the world use. You have all different counselling, psychotherapies, psychiatrists, different services for different issues. There'll be like an eating disorder service, or a service for psychosis, or service for home treatment team where people go into people's houses. All of this comes under, of course, the NHS banner, but there's also private ways as well of that. And again, I'm not going to claim to know all of them, but they're available. People can find them out on websites and go to their GPs and things like that. There is lots and lots of self-help guidance online. and in book format, very, very, good for people to learn and to educate themselves on their well-being and how to look after it. The one thing I would say about that is just don't overdo it. I think people can overread and over-research, can't they? You then have all sorts of things like what are called peer support groups and activities, and that is very much what we at Haver in Mind do. These different groups and activities to get people to come together to learn about their well-being and support one another, and I'll talk about them in a second. Medication is given in some cases, but not necessarily all. And medication, it's important to remember that things like antidepressants are not happy pills, that you don't suddenly start taking them and suddenly feel better. They're there to sort of take the edge off. But if you're not confronting the underlying issues behind them, then what are they there for? Physical exercise spoke about quite a lot as well, and we all feel good once we've done something physical, whether that be going for a run or a good walk or something like that. It doesn't necessarily mean we have to join a gym and be like Arnold Schwarzenegger or anything like that. But getting a bit of physical exercise is good, as is relaxing and mindfulness techniques. And then there is as well in sort of the more severe or the more extreme cases, there's what's known as inpatient care, where people would essentially be inside a mental health hospital. There's a video. I won't show you this video, but I will share it with Annie, and Annie can send this around. There's lots of good videos, to be fair, online, but there's a good video all about getting help from a GP. It's another animated video, and it's a Mind video, and they give you sort of advice on how to talk to your GP. So in terms of mental health, just during the past year, during the COVID-19 pandemic, obviously lots of things have changed, haven't they, in the world, and people are working from home, and kids are not in school and things like that, and that has led to, unfortunately or inevitably, a large increase in people needing support, or people feeling down or anxious, in particularly health anxieties, things like that. People perhaps stuck indoors, isolated or lonely, or just not used to being working from home, or I suppose they are probably used to it now, but not having that social interaction with other people, not having that normal day routine and things like that. And that has had a massive effect, and we probably won't see the outcomes of all of that just yet. I think that people are still coming to terms with everything like that. I think you'll start to see a lot more people, perhaps even doctors and nurses, that are reaching out for extra help to cope. But and it's just some of the ones on there: not seeing friends and family, too much time at home, lack of usual routine, bereavement perhaps as well, tough working from home. And what, in terms of what people can do to look after their mental health during this time and in general, well, Mind talks about this thing called the 5 ways to well-being, which is on the screen now. This little wheel there, and the 5 things are these. So first of all, connect. So connecting with the people that are around us, so our friends, our family. Talking to people, keeping in touch with people. The great thing about this day and age is that we have the technology to do that, don't we? We have things like this, things like Zoom, things like Facebook and WhatsApp and FaceTime and things like that. So we, in the olden days, perhaps we would just write a letter, or you'd have to go to a payphone and ring someone. You can now, use mobile, you can text, you can send voice messages, everything like that. So that is really, really important to check in on people and to make sure that people are doing okay. Keep on learning, so learning new things, taking in new bits of information. Watching an interesting documentary, or reading an interesting book, or watching a film, or reading the news, or perhaps not too much. Anything that we can do to stimulate our brains and keep our brains working is a really good thing. Then taking notice of the world around us. Lots of us sort of work or sort of live on autopilot, where we're just like tunnel vision and we don't really see all the things that are around us. We don't take notice of the environment that we're in. So just maybe taking a step back and doing that, and perhaps trying to relax a bit more and taking solitude and time out is really important. Then being active, spoke about this a minute ago, didn't I? Doing exercise, getting out and about, getting out in fresh air, getting out in the garden. I know it can be a bit difficult at the minute because of the terrible weather, but doing things that keep us active is is very, very good for not just our physical but also our mental health. And then giving, so that could be giving support or giving advice or helping other people, volunteering, doing something for other people, our community, supporting charities, NHS, whatever it is. There's so many different things that we can do in terms of the giving part. And then just some other things. A lot of these are, I think you've probably heard them all before, haven't you? Looking after our physical health, so keeping clean, keeping our bodies clean and washed and maintained, looking after our teeth, not drinking too much fizzy drinks, that sort of thing, getting enough sleep, but not too much sleep, eating healthily, lots of vegetables and vitamins, things like that, not drinking too much alcohol. We do things like listening to music, talking about our thoughts and our feelings, having personal time or solitude, getting outside, fresh air, sunshine, supporting others. So lots of different things that we can do, and everybody's different. So everybody's different things are going to help different people, aren't they? We like to use this tool as well, this weekly wellbeing check, which has actually been made by Mental Health First Aid England, and this is just a sort of a simple checkup that people can do to themselves each week. At the end of each week, at the beginning of each week, where they just have a check-in with themselves and say, what is their mental health life at the minute? What can I do to look after it? Am I, getting enough sleep? Am I drinking enough water? What are my thoughts and feelings? What's stressing me out? Things like that. And this comes in many different forms. This one here is just sort of an image on the screen, but there's all sorts of checklists that people can do as well that you can find online that I think is very, very useful if you've got the time. So in terms of some local support for mental health, so as you know, I'm from Havering Mind. So it says in the thing, working in Havering, Barking and Dagenham, we have a number of services that that we provide. First and foremost, we have a gateway service, which is basically a telephone and email information support and signposting. So people will contact us, and they'll probably be interested in, perhaps they've got a poor mental health or they're feeling down and they're struggling, or maybe one of their loved ones is. They'll call us. My colleagues will then give information, advice. They'll either signpost them to other organisations or the appropriate services, or they will say, why don't you come get involved in what we do? Won't go through all of them there, but as you see the coloured boxes there at the bottom, these are all the different things that we do. Very much about getting people active, getting them to learn and understand about their mental health, to learn and understand different coping skills and mechanisms, getting them supporting one another, doing things out in the community, doing activities, getting them to come together. Obviously, in the past year, it's been significantly different because of COVID, and pretty much everything's had to be done virtually, which a lot of them have got used to, but then a lot of them, it's still very difficult. Nothing beats meeting up with people one-on-one, doesn't it? So lots and lots of things go into there. We've got a gardening group, all different peer groups, choirs, walking groups, badminton, all sorts of things like that. So lots and lots of different things. And then generally our services encourage all these things here: improved well-being, social inclusion, greater understanding of mental health, higher self-esteem, better coping strategies, and physical activity with outdoors things. Then of course there is your statutory services that come under NELFT, most of them, which I won't go into because obviously I don't work there, but huge amounts of information on their website. Also the council's website, Havering Council, they've just started a new mental health awareness campaign called Be Nice to Your Noggin, which they've got a dedicated website on there. There's lots and lots of information on there, all about promoting mental health. And there's various other websites, charities, organisations that provide different resources. I'll pick on a couple. Mind in particular, National Mind, have a great website where there's huge amounts of resources. This one here, Mind Out, down the bottom there, that's particularly for LGBT community. Calm campaign against living miserably, Young Minds, very good for young people, Beat, it's an eating disorders charity. So there's a whole host of different places. Then there's some other ones locally that you might have heard of: HBBS Counselling, Samaritans, Havering, YMCA, HAD, Peabody, Sycamore Trust, Tapestry, Bark and Dagenham Carers. There's so many different organisations out there that might not be specifically about mental health, but they still provide things that are gonna improve a person's mental health and their well-being. And this is just one of the campaign images from that noggin campaign that I just mentioned here. These are some of the images that you'll see that they're promoting. It's okay to fall apart sometimes. Tacos fall apart, but we still love them. I think it's quite a nice little quote there. So just some key points then. And I know it's only been able to be really a brief talk, but key points is that we all do have our own mental health. It is really, really important that we look after our mental health, in particular, the times that we're all going through now. It's vital that we prevent them from developing early. That's why it's so important that our young people and children, have at least a basic understanding of it all. Everyone's experience of mental health is different because we're all different people. Talking about our thoughts and our feelings is a good thing, and not being afraid to approach someone about their mental health or asking ourselves for help, or seeking out help or information, not being afraid to do that. And I always end any presentation I do with this. I think it's really nice. You can't control the winds, but you can adjust the sails. I think that pretty much says it all, doesn't it, about what we can do for well-being.